But if you think accepting that flatly unconstitutional multi-million-dollar personal gift from the Qataris was audacious, wait until you hear about Trump's dinner plans for tonight. Right now, as I'm speaking to you at this hour, with protesters outside, the most brazen act of corruption by a president in our lifetimes, probably in a century, possibly ever, is going down in Northern Virginia right now. They're not really hiding it so much. You could call it the Met Gala of presidential pay for play. Now, of course, we are used to hearing about fancy gala dinners where politicians rub elbows with their top campaign donors who are donating, often specifically so they can be near those politicians. And unfortunately, that's become part and parcel of our political system, and I think people view it with a jaundiced eye, understandably. This is not that. Really can't stress that enough. This is just totally at another level, an entirely different stratosphere of corruption. A, quote, unforgettable gala dinner with the president at his 800-acre Trump National Golf Resort in Potomac Falls, Virginia, for a very exclusive group.
220 winners of a contest to meet President Trump, the top holders of his crypto coin.
I don't know much about it other than I launched it. I heard it was very successful.
NBC News has learned each dinner guest paid between $55,000 and $37.7 million for the Trump coin.
Now, remember, the day before becoming president, Trump, day before inauguration, launched this meme coin, right? It's the Trump coin. And then this whole dinner thing was announced first back in April. It was at www.gettrumpmemes.com. The president's meme coin sought investors who would pour untraceable cash into his crypto wallet. And the top 220 got an invite to tonight's dinner. Black tie optional. For the top 25 Trump meme coin holders, there was an exclusive reception with the president before dinner. All told, in order to get in tonight's gala, the winning guests forked out a total of nearly $400 million, according to NBC News. This was essentially an open advertised competition to see who would pay the biggest literal tribute to Donald Trump's crypto coin. And because of the way this meme coin works, which is issued by Trump and whose purchase always sends money to the company that he's part of, this is really not functionally different than if those guests showed up with satchels of cash or briefcases with stacks of bills and then just dumped all that into a big bucket physically held by the President of the United States.
Well, the website for the contest says that the president is appearing at the dinner as a guest and not soliciting any funds for it. Another site says that 80% of the Trump Coin project is owned by two companies affiliated or in business with Trump.
Again, as Trump said, I launched the coin, right? These are Trump businesses. Again, now, if these were campaign donations, the level of the donations and the people donating would make this just an absolute facial violation of every campaign finance law ever. But again, it's even worse than that. This is not going towards Donald Trump's political campaigns or, his super PAC. No. This is just money in the president's business empire. And when asked, the White House keeps saying that Donald Trump, the president of the United States, is not attending this dinner where he's attending this dinner where he will make millions of dollars, not as president, but in his personal capacity.
On the president's dinner tonight, will the White House commit to making a list of the attendees public so people can see who's paying for that kind of access to the president?
Well, as you know, Garrett, this question has been raised with the president. I have also addressed the dinner tonight. The president is attending it in his personal time. It is not a White House dinner. It's not taking place here at the White House.
So that's a no, I think, on the list of attendees. You don't really have to understand crypto to see how this works. You just need to understand people like Justin Sun, okay? Here's just one example. Justin Sun's a Chinese-born crypto billionaire whose company has been a popular way to move money for crypto's criminal underbelly. And for years, Justin Sun wouldn't even set foot in the U.S. for fear of arrest, according to reporting from the Wall Street Journal. Also, he was under investigation by the Department of Justice and the Treasury, as well as a lawsuit that was filed by the SEC. But guess where Sun is tonight?
nice to be here today with like everybody in the crypto to witness this great moment of crypto. And the president will be on the stage later. So see you.
See you, Justin. He's there tonight. In fact, in addition to being the top Trump coin investor, Sun also went in with the Trump family on a separate investment last year. And all told, he has sunk at least $93 million into Trump crypto ventures, according to CNBC. And would you believe, this is really going to come as a shock, in February, right after Trump took office, wouldn't you know, the SEC asked a court to pause its lawsuit against Sun. So it had filed a lawsuit in the previous administration, and then Sun went into business in crypto with Trump, and then Trump got elected, and then a few weeks later, the SEC is like, we want to pause this lawsuit. Now, instead of quietly counting his blessings for appearing to have successfully wriggled out what could have been some legal trouble, Sun tweeted that he was Trump's top meme coin donor. What's the emoji for a victory laugh? Now, we only know Sun is at tonight's gala because he bragged about it. In fact, the identities of most of the other contest winners are largely private. They use pseudonyms to purchase their Trump meme coins. But, and this is really important, a majority of the attendees appear to be foreign nationals, according to Molly White, an independent crypto researcher who has written about the contest. Again, foreigners cannot legally donate to an actual U.S. campaign. In normal times, the Department of State is in charge of stopping and sanctioning foreigners who donate to American political campaigns. But as Secretary of State Marco Rubio made clear this week, we're not in normal times.
Do you have a list of those foreign individuals who will be meeting with the president?
I don't. I don't know anything about it. I didn't even know there was a dinner.
It is likely going to involve some very significant foreign interests. You have to be pretty wealthy in order to be able to get inside this dinner. Isn't that a relevant question for the Secretary of State?
Yeah, I'm not the social
Which foreign
secretary,
interests are going to be speaking to the president? I mean, it's kind of naive to believe that they aren't going to be in that room talking about national security matters.
Well, I don't think that that's the case at all, because I would be aware if it was the case.
Oh, well, that's a pretty good tautological reasoning. They won't be because I would be aware of it if that were the case, and I'm not aware of it, therefore they won't be. Just the President of the United States being a guest at a dinner where a bidding war helped decide who gets invited based on how much untraceable cash they forked over to Donald Trump's meme coin. A crypto scheme that, according to estimates, has enabled him to make hundreds of millions of dollars off of being president in just a few months. For Donald Trump, regaining the presidency was always fundamentally, I think, about two things. One, most crucially, avoiding jail for the many crimes that he was indicted for, and making as much money as he can. And we've known that for a long time. But the audacity and the scale of his profiteering can still be managed to be shocking.
Live look at the House floor where lawmakers just passed the Republican Party's massive tax and spending package. At least 2 Republicans, though, did vote against the bill, but it made it through. Let's go straight to Ali Vitale. Ali, what more can you tell us here?
Yeah, Willie, this is one of those moments where the House floor worked as we predicted it to. We were watching to see if any more Republicans would defect and thusly tank the Speaker's work here. In the end, that's not what happened. We saw 2 Republicans side with Democrats, the ones that we anticipated at the top of Morning Joe. That was, of course, Thomas Massie of Kentucky, who had been clear that he was a no here, and then Warren Davidson of Ohio, who in just the last few minutes before going to the floor said that his deficit concerns outweighed his ability to vote yes on this. Those were the 2 no votes. Then notably, Andy Harris voted present. He is the top Republican of the conservative House Freedom Caucus. So notable there, but ultimately not enough to stop the passage of this bill, which means now Republicans have cleared a key hurdle. Mike Johnson likely to take a victory lap as we watch the House floor. He's right at the center of that cluster of lawmakers that you see in the corner of the screen on the right-hand side. A lot of people giving him kudos and congratulations because this was a hard-fought and long-negotiated battle, one that had many late nights, a lot of lawmakers keeping our kind of morning hours, much to their chagrin. But ultimately, it was Johnson, with the help of President Donald Trump, who was able to get this over the finish line, giving Republicans a win and allowing this package to move forward. But the only constant is change at the end of the day, Willie. And this bill is going to see a lot of it once it gets to the Senate. After the Senate does its work with it, it comes back to the House. So a key step. But by no means is this the end. And by no means is this a full-on win yet for Republicans on this package, but a badly needed battle won here for the Speaker.
Ali, as you know, many conservatives, Republicans were vocal in their criticism of this massive package. They said it was too big, it had too much in it, raised the deficit too high. Someone like Congressman Chip Roy of Texas standing on conservative principles saying we cannot vote for this. How did someone like Congressman Roy get to a yes vote?
Congressman Roy, Congressman Norman, other key members who are part of that more fiscally conservative conference saying that they had deficit concerns. But ultimately here, those were assuaged. And we can argue with whether or not it's actually fixing the problems that they purport to care about, because estimates still show that this is going to add close to $4 trillion to the debt. But what assuaged them in the end was basically putting in play earlier offsets around Medicaid and food assistance programs, for example, saying that the work requirements and other money-saving mechanisms that Republicans say root out waste, fraud, and abuse in those programs, by putting those in play earlier, that allowed for greater savings, or at least not additions to the deficit. And that's how they ultimately got fiscal hardliners on board. But also politics plays a key role in this, right? They have been loath, Republicans, to go against President Trump. Trump has been clear that anyone who doesn't vote with him on these agendas should be primaried or voted out of office. We've seen, of course, a few, and by that I mean one consistently, Thomas Massie of Kentucky, hold strong against those kinds of broadsides from the president. But largely, Trump has shown that he's not just the kingmaker in the party, but he is someone who can ultimately move votes, even those from reluctant Republicans, to his cause. When push comes to shove, Republicans have now voted for this package. It's going to go through changes, but regardless, they're going to have to defend what's in this early iteration of the bill, whether they're moderate or conservative.
So, Ali, this is a victory in the moment, as you say, but then there's the Senate to contend with. Republicans in the Senate have said, no way. If you want to break this up into 3 pieces, come back and talk to us. But too big, too much. What happens from here now?
Well, right now they are proceeding with this one big, beautiful bill track. That's not to say that this thing doesn't get broken apart. At this point, that would be a surprising change in strategy. But there are still some Senate Republicans who whisper about the prospect of this one bill being too big and ultimately full of too many thorny issues to actually get it passed. Some of the substantive changes, though, that we're going to be looking for on the Senate side of the equation will likely come to the health care changes that we talked about earlier on when we started this program. The idea that there are more work eligibility requirements, changes, for example, to the way that SNAP's cost sharing is going to be done between federal and state funding spaces. That would be a major overhaul to the food assistance program and just the foundational way that it functions and that people are able to access it. That could be another change that we see Senate Republicans take issue with and ultimately make their own tweaks to. There's a bunch of different ways that this could go. I think the other piece of this, and we'll tune in more when it gets to the Senate, is there were early disagreements on the immigration funding front. We talked about how this House bill puts about $90 million into further immigration enforcement at DHS and DOJ, but Senate Republicans wanted more money for that. And it could be that if this bill starts hitting too many stumbling blocks, we start seeing it get pieced apart. Maybe they do immigration and continuing the tax cuts from 2017 into its own bill. There's a bunch of different iterations of this. But the reason that House Republicans and the president ultimately pushed for this one bill at once is that it requires a lot of political capital. And right now, the momentum is on Republicans' side. We'll see what kind of stumbling blocks they ultimately hit, though.
Jonathan Lemire, I'm going to quote a former congressman named Joe Scarborough, R. Pensacola, who said on this show yesterday, quote, if you claim to be a fiscal conservative, you cannot vote for this bill. Well, a bunch of them just did. How much of that is the pressure top down from President Trump, who took the rare step of actually visiting the Capitol to rally the troops the other day?
Whatever happened to that guy? Lawmaker, former lawmaker, now in obscurity. Yeah, this is, you're right. This was as Ali rightly said, it's a win for Speaker Johnson, but it's also a win for President Trump. He had been sort of content to stay on the sidelines for most of this process, just the occasional Truth Social saying that this one big, beautiful bill needed to be passed. But that changed this week, went to the Capitol, really pushed lawmakers to get this done, even confronted a few of the moderates like Mike Lawler of New York, saying, look, this, you need this. There's this implicit threat, of course, that some of these Congress members might have been primaried from the right, from the MAGA wing of the party if they didn't go along. So the bill has an uncertain future, and the political ramifications, uncertain. The economic ramifications, a lot of people, including Steve Rattner, really worried about. But in terms of politics in this moment, President Trump has basically said, this is the one thing I want to get done here in these first 2 years, pre-midterms, when he officially becomes a lame duck. An important hurdle cleared. He used some of his political capital to make it happen.
Now to some breaking news. The Supreme Court split 4-4 over that challenge to launching the nation's first religious public charter school in Oklahoma. NBC senior Supreme Court reporter Lawrence Hurley is following it for us. You've reported on this story from Oklahoma. What's the big takeaway here?
So first, it's important to separate out what the situation is in Oklahoma as opposed to the rest of the country. So this decision means these public religious charter schools cannot move forward in Oklahoma. It leaves in place an Oklahoma Supreme Court ruling that said that violates both state law and the U.S. Constitution, the First Amendment that protects against the separation, the establishment of religion. And so that's the situation in Oklahoma. There's other ways that religious schools can obviously operate there the way they normally do. At the national level, a 4-4 split on the Supreme Court means there's no real decision. It just leaves in place that Oklahoma decision in Oklahoma. So there's no national precedent set, which means there's no rule applying to 49 other states. So there's no reason why other states couldn't try to do the same thing. The question is whether that case, because presumably it would be challenged, would then come back up to the Supreme Court. And then the question then is, would they approve it? This time around, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who recused in this case, one of the conservative majority members, she would presumably be able to participate in that case. And then you'd have the 6-3 conservative majority that we've seen in other cases. And we don't know how that's going to come out. She obviously comes from a conservative background and was a professor at Notre Dame Law School and is known for supporting religious liberty. So most observers would assume she might be in a majority that would allow for such schools. But, we can't say for sure until that case comes up. So, and there's also no sign so far from the people I've talked to that other states are close to approving a school like this. So we're still waiting to see whether another case will come up and how quickly that could happen.
Lawrence Hurley, thank you.
The Trump administration just halted Harvard University's ability to enroll international students. This is breaking news, marking a major escalation in the administration's efforts to pressure the university to fall in line with the president's agenda. Joining us now, MSNBC's Antonia Hilton, co-host of Weekend Prime, and MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. All right, who do I go to first here? Lisa, what is Antonia, what are they asking? It's just breaking. What are they asking Harvard to do? Is it they can't enroll new international students, or the ones that are there have to go somewhere else?
So some of this, remains to be seen. I'm talking to people at Harvard right now, and there's immense confusion and fear over this because they're actually struggling to interpret some parts of these. At least the students are. So it sounds like they have basically lost their ability to enroll international students. And so that's going to impact future students. But we're also hearing that Kristi Noem, the secretary of DHS, announced that current international students there must transfer or lose their status.
Transfer to another American university.
Another university that would be in good standing with this program. So what that means a couple weeks out from graduation day is that if those students don't transfer, they might lose their legal status here in the U.S. And we know what this administration has been doing to students.
What is the timeline on them having to do this?
Well, it sounds, Katie, from the letter, I'm looking at Secretary Noem's letter to Harvard. It says the revocation of your student and exchange visitor program certification, and that's the program through which...
Their visa.
Right. It's the program through which universities are certified every 2 years to have foreign students and non-citizens on their campuses. It says you are prohibited from having any aliens on certain non-immigrant statuses for the 2025-2026 academic school year. But to Antonia's point, the beginning of the letter starts, I'm writing to inform you that effective immediately, Harvard University's Student and Exchange Visitor Program certification is revoked.
Did a lawyer write this?
I can't say whether a lawyer wrote this or not. I would tell you that in the normal course, I would expect that a lawyer at the Department of Homeland Security would have at least participated in the writing of this letter. But the letter, as I read it here, not only would this be confusing to a student on campus, this would be confusing to an administrator. And it may be that I just have to sit
Sounds
and
like
parse
it's
this for
confusing
a
to
while.
a lawyer.
Yes, well, a former lawyer at that. But yes, it is confusing to this former litigator and current journalist reading it here with you.
Okay, so this is part of a bigger issue here that the administration is having with Harvard. They wanted Harvard to adopt some pretty strict rules about what Harvard can teach, how Harvard admits people, the people they allow to teach. They want
programs they administer.
Programs. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just give me the brief background on what they were asking.
Yes, this is an escalation of a fight that has been going on for quite a while now. Harvard has lost billions of dollars in federal support for all kinds of critical research funding that's already impacting the university. And now, I want to make clear, too, in case anyone's wondering, well, why is it important to have international students on college campuses? Well, not only do they make up about 27% of the student body life there and at many universities in the U.S., international students pay full price. So they make it possible for American students from disadvantaged backgrounds to have an opportunity to come to schools like Harvard. So what's actually going to happen here is a lot of those international students are going to have options to go elsewhere. It is going to be underprivileged, marginalized Americans of all backgrounds who apply to schools like Harvard and then are unable to afford the opportunity to go there. So that's the impact here. It's actually us. We're going to be hurt if this really does end up following through. But this is part of a bigger effort this administration has made to try to have control over who this university hires and fires in certain departments, to try to track activists and protest movements on campus. They have said the president hasn't done enough to tackle anti-Semitism on campus. If you're wondering who Harvard's president is a Jewish man named Alan Garber, who has been a fierceful fighter against anti-Semitism on campus, has held all kinds of cross-cultural dialogue, made changes, policy changes on campus, to the point where he's taken flack from the other side at many points. So for the Harvard community, this has actually been a really uniting thing for people of all political backgrounds on opposite ends of the protests, conversations that have happened on college campus, because they see this as a existential threat, not just to their school, but higher education.
Harvard said no to this. Harvard said, we're not going to back down.
That's right.
We're not going to acquiesce to your demands. We're not going to allow you to come in and tell us what we can teach and what we cannot teach, who we can allow to teach and who we cannot allow to teach, and what our student population looks like. So they've taken a stand and said, no, they're suing. And this is just another step.
This is actually more than that, because in addition to the funding fight that we're talking about, we're not going to make these changes in exchange for federal funding. The administration came to Harvard and said, you are going to give us certain records about your non-citizen students, including all disciplinary records pertaining to non-immigrant students, meaning people who are here on student visas. And Harvard just ignored that deadline, or it may have said, no, we're not going to comply with that.
That's what complying with their deportation efforts.
But that is what gets us to this particular moment. And in fact, what Kristi Noem is saying in this letter is, you give us various categories of these records within 72 hours, or we're going to execute on this threat.
Can they sue on this revocation of the ability to enroll international students? Is there a way for them to sue?
I was looking into that right before we sat with you. I don't know what the bases are for revoking this enrollment in this particular certification program, and certainly universities go through it every 2 years. But is revocation permissible just because you don't comply with providing the kinds of records that most colleges and universities would consider private? Probably not. Does Harvard have a leg to stand on here, at least in the court of public opinion? I would think so.
Yeah, again, just broke. So you got to take another couple minutes to figure out exactly how the process is going to work and all of it. Lisa Rubin, Antonia Hilton, ladies, thank you very much.
What we saw last night, this morning, despicable. And, I'm reminded, by the way, of a great Minnesotan, Hubert Humphrey, who once said that the moral test of government is how government treats those in the dawn of life, our children, those in the twilight of life, our seniors, and those in the shadows of life, the sick and the disabled. And what we just saw, is clearly a rejection of that moral test of government by the Republicans, because is it moral to actually take food away from starving children? Is it moral to actually kick seniors out of nursing homes? Is it moral to actually take health care away from the disabled? I mean, there's 14 million Americans who are now going to lose health care in this country. There are 48 million people who need food assistance who are going to lose their food assistance. And Simone knows this about me. My mom was 15 years old when she had me. She raised 4 kids on her own. By the time she was 20, she had 4 kids. She struggled mightily. And without Medicaid in my life when I was a little boy, I wouldn't have had food. I wouldn't have had health care. Without SNAP, I would not have had food benefits. The reality is these programs are a lifeline for so many. And in a time when Donald Trump literally has destroyed the economy and made it even more hard for people to actually live their lives, this bill will make it even more difficult for millions of Americans. It's not only immoral, it's completely going to destroy communities. And, you know, we've got to stand up and fight back hard, just like Leader Jeffries said, and that's what we're going to do.
$700 billion projected by the Congressional Budget Office, cuts to Medicaid. Those cuts that will include stricter work requirements. Stricter is important because work requirements are already required to be on Medicaid, but the discourse of the last couple of days would have you believe it didn't. For able-bodied adults under 65, this is going to begin on the last day of 2026. Other cuts, $290 billion from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. That's SNAP. That's the food aid program you were talking about. The fact that many of these cuts will not yet take place until after the midterms, I do think is them
telling on themselves.
Okay, they are telling on themselves. Right. They could have instituted these cuts sooner, but the cuts are not coming until the end of 2026, most of them. That's after the midterm elections. What are Democrats doing now? Are there ads preparing to be cut? How are you all going to make your case to voters across the country that Republicans did these things to you, even though people won't feel it just yet?
Well, they're cuts nonetheless, right? And the reality is we need to remind people what's happening. We've already held over 120 town halls throughout the country in all 50 states. Why? Because why did Speaker Johnson shut down those town halls? He wanted to make sure that the stories of average, everyday working people in this country weren't being told, and that you all weren't paying attention to them. So guess what we decided to do? We decided to do the jobs of the Republican congressional members for them, making sure we have town halls, making sure we actually lift up the voices of people, Democrats, Republicans, independents, anyone in this country who's being impacted by these devastating policies from this Trump administration. And we're going to continue to do that throughout the summer, throughout the fall, throughout next year. There has to be accountability to this. And while people aren't going to be impacted immediately, they are going to be impacted. And we're going to remind folks of that because there needs to be accountability. And for what purpose did they push this bill through? All to give the people who already have the most in our society even more. Think about that, Simone. They're throwing children off of assistance. They're throwing families to the curb so that they can give people who already have so much even more. That is what we need to be talking about. This is about morals. It's not about party. It's not about Democrats or Republicans. It's about right or wrong. And at this point, we need to keep reminding the American people. You know, at the end of the day, Democrats, you've heard me say this before, and it's important right now. In 2016, I heard someone say that the Republicans are shameless, but the Democrats are spineless. And if we're not willing to fight like hell right now, Simone, for the things that we say we believe in, then do we really believe in them at all? Do we believe in the things we say as Democrats? Because if we do, as Leader Jeffries said, we have to stand up right now and fight back with everything we have against this immoral administration.
You have... On the Republican side, it's not all roses. You do have some Republicans who, whether they're in the Freedom Caucus or in the so-called moderate wing of the party, such as it exists, saying no to this bill. You had Ohio Representative Warren Davidson voting no, saying on X, I cannot support this big deficit plan. You had House Freedom Caucus chair from Maryland, my backyard, and Andy Harris, who's been very, very vocal on this, voted present. But then my favorite were the two members of Congress who fell asleep who
So they missed the vote.
Who missed the vote because they were asleep.
I was a page in the cloakroom, and I just want to say I saw a lot of naps.
A lot of naps
Nobody
to
was there to
David
wake 'em up.
Schweikert and Andrew Garbarino. But there was Thomas Massey who had this to say, which I think if you're talking about ads, Chairman, you may want to consider.
We're going to rack up, the authors say, $20 trillion of new debt over the next 10 years. I'm telling you, it's closer to $30 trillion of new debt in the next 10 years. Mr. Speaker, we're not rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic tonight. We're putting coal in the boiler and setting a course for the iceberg.
Why that's important? Because you generally don't know you've hit the iceberg until you've hit the iceberg. Right. And that's the problem that Democrats find themselves in this cycle because of the way they're structuring this. Now, whether or not to stay, I suspect the Senate Republicans will keep it that way. This won't take effect until after 2026, the end of 2026. So the challenge you have as chairman and the challenge your state party chairman have is how do you, and I love the passion of the argument you're making, but how do you make people feel exactly what they don't know is about to hit them? Because absent that, you know, if the 401k levels out, if, you know, prices kind of level out, whatever happens over the course of the summer sort of feeds into the fall, you begin to get into this rhythm. And so how do you disrupt that rhythm? Yeah. Beyond just the, you know, the typical political rhetoric, you really have to make people fear in some sense that these bad things are they're real and that they will have the SNAP program, for example, going on.
Yeah, I think you're right. But let me just say this, that the American people already had buyer's remorse. Mm-hmm. With the tariffs that are put in place, of course, the cost of goods increasing, their lives being harder to actually live and get ahead. The reality is the cuts to so many federal programs already, which are impacting communities and state and local governments, they're already feeling the pinch. And they're going to continue to feel the pinch. And we need to remind them that it's going to get even more difficult in the years to come because of this package. There's no doubt about it. But there are advocacy groups, organizations, the DNC and others who are not going to let the Republicans off the hook on this. And let me just remind you, every single Democrat voted against this bill. At the end of the day, the Republicans own this. Mm-hmm. The Republicans own this, and they will be held to account. Because what's going to happen is devastating to communities throughout this country. And again, this is not a partisan issue. At some point, we have to rise above partisanship in this country. And Michael, I will say this to you, Mr. Chair. There were values that united this country, regardless of ideology. Things like respect for our Constitution, the rule of law, separation of power, the idea of an independent and free press, respecting our allies around the world and protecting, standing up for and protecting emerging democracies, and so many other pieces that united this country, including a belief that we were one community, and we fought for our neighbors, and we made sure that no one was left behind and fell through the cracks. This social safety net that was created by Democrats and Republicans for so many years is so popular because we still hold true to this ethos that we know there are people who are going to fall on tough times. And there has to be a safety net there to make sure that they can get back up, get back on their feet, and actually get ahead in life. That's what's being eroded right now. This is not just about Democrats and what we believe in. This is what Republicans used to believe in as well. And certainly at the end of the day, we have to remind the American voters that what we're seeing is a complete abdication of who we are as Americans. We are better than this. And we're going to continue to remind the American people of that in the months to come.
This was a really tight vote. And Amanda Littman, who runs the progressive group Run for Something, tweeted this about it. The margins of this vote, affected by the three Dems who sadly died in office, is why we can't shy away from the uncomfortable conversations around the age of our elected leaders. The stakes are too high. Do you think this is the moment to have a conversation in the Democratic Party about the gerontocracy?
Well, look, I think it's always important to have a conversation about how we create pathways of leadership for young people and new voices in this party. But I do think I want to remind folks that this bill did not pass because of Democrats. Even if we had all of those seats filled, we still wouldn't have been able to slow this down because the Republicans had the votes to pass this.
You would have had to force it would have forced more Republicans to an awkward position.
But regardless, the idea that somehow this is on Democrats are to blame for what happened is just hogwash. I agree with Amanda. I agree with David. I agree with others that we need, again, find ways to create pathways for new leaders in this party, young voices to serve both in positions of elected office and in party leadership and in other spaces. It's absolutely critical at this time. But to conflate the two as if somehow, if we had all of our voting strength here, right, we would have been able to stop this is just flat out wrong. The two are not related. I do think, I agree with Amanda and David, we do need to get more young people into our party process.
Has the Democratic National Committee scheduled the meeting yet for Democrats to vote on the new credentials that came out of the Credentials Committee, pardon me, not credentials, the Rules Committee, about having new elections for those vice chairs, including David Hogg and Malcolm Kenyatta?
It hasn't been scheduled yet. You've been on the DNC and all these
That's
things.
why I'm like, well, where's the meeting now?
You know how these things work. Tonight, actually, it's one of the reasons I have to leave here in a little bit, is the Rules and Bylaws Committee, which will decide when all of this stuff happens, both the timeline, the rules of procedure, and all of that stuff. And that will get worked out, of course. And we'll see how that works out. You know, for me, as people are focused on the inside machinery of what happens in the party, and of course, it's an important conversation, let me say where my focus is, right? Squarely on winning elections. It's the reason I ran on this. It's the success I had in Minnesota. I never took my eye off of the prize, which is to actually build power around our shared values and keep the main thing the main thing. The main thing is winning elections. The main thing right now is stopping this authoritarian regime from destroying our country and shattering people's lives. The main thing is winning in 25, 26, and in 28, and that's what I'm focused on.
Ken Martin said keep the main thing the main thing. Y'all worry about the wrong thing.
Politics, as in life, be careful what you vote for.
Okay.
So today, the Trump administration released its report on making America healthy again. It's lengthy, and it tries to diagnose the main causes of chronic disease in America. It paints a pretty bleak picture of children's health, focusing largely on ultra-processed foods, chemical exposures, lack of physical activity, stress, and excessive use of prescription drugs. And look, health and chronic disease are serious issues, but I think we should all be pretty skeptical that this commission, headed by a crank conspiracy theorist, will come up with the proper prescriptions for these problems. And that's the important part here, right? Because if the Trump administration really cared about making America healthy again, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. They wouldn't have closed the CDC's Office on Smoking and Health, or halted funding for the Diabetes Prevention Program, or made plans to roll back regulations on forever chemicals in drinking water, or censored leading nutrition scientists, or cut billions of dollars in research funding at the NIH, the largest funder of cancer research. And they definitely wouldn't have supported a bill that will strip healthcare and food access from millions of Americans. Joining me now is Dr. Ashish Jha. He is Dean of the Brown University School of Public Health and the former White House COVID-19 response coordinator. I wanted to, chronic health is obviously a big issue, a serious issue. We all care about our kids' health. But what have you, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at this report, what it outlines and what some of the conclusions are. What do you make of it?
Yeah, well, first of all, Jen, thanks for having me back. Look, starts off by saying our kids are the sickest they've ever been. I think it's worth remembering childhood mortality is the lowest it's ever been in the U.S. history, and that's because of vaccines. We've gotten much better at preventing a lot of infectious illnesses. Now, the report, what it gets right, let's start there. It identifies chronic illness as a problem. It is. It's great to see the Secretary join the public health movement. We've been talking about obesity. We've been talking about access to better food. We've been talking about exercise. Those are important things, no question. The problem is then when he gets into prescriptions of what to do, there's really just not much there. And most of his ideas are not based in science. And so he identifies the problem that all of us have been talking about, but without anything that even remotely resembles a solution.
Then the solutions are kind of pivotal here, I would say. He said in his recent hearings, he said on multiple occasions that he did not know if a program had been cut or not, which seems like a pretty pivotal thing for the HHS secretary to know. What do you make of that he seems to be unaware of the decisions that are going on in his own agency?
Yeah. Well, that's the other part of this, right? And you allude to this both in your opening statement and now that, look, he identifies chronic disease as a serious problem. We all agree with that. Totally right. But if he actually believed that, he would not be eliminating the Office of Chronic Disease Prevention at the CDC. As you said, he would not be eliminating massive amounts of research on how to prevent obesity and chronic disease in children. Like, there is a huge mismatch between the slogan, the tagline that says chronic disease is a problem, and then gutting all the programs that are actually going to do anything about it. So it's really not clear what the secretary intends because his words don't seem to match his actions.
While you're here, I wanted to ask you about vaccines. I mean, you mentioned them as well, and you were the COVID-19 coordinator for the Biden administration. This administration has limited approval for seasonal COVID-19 shots to seniors and high-risk individuals, and the FDA advisory panel is split on whether the agency should require updates of COVID vaccines, which opens the door, of course, to the possibility that we won't have updated shots for the fall. Well, first of all, I hope I summarized it correctly, but help us understand what the impact of that could be on people's access for the vaccine and health.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, Jen, when we made decisions about this, when I was at the White House, first of all, the people at the White House didn't make the decisions. The scientists at the FDA made those decisions, and they based it on data. There is no data on which they are making these decisions. Second, the secretary said he was never going to limit people's access to vaccines. He has just limited people's access to vaccines. If you're under 65, you're not going to be eligible. My view is people over 65 absolutely need to get COVID vaccines. People under 65 should have the option, especially if they have chronic diseases. He is really taking away people's choices. And I really do worry about where this is going. Annual updates of COVID vaccines, like annual updates of flu vaccines, is essential, especially for high-risk people. And whether he's going to continue doing that or not really is unclear at this moment.
Thank you, Dr. Ashish Jha. I always enjoy talking to you. Helps provide a lot of clarity to people out there. Really appreciate it.